You're listening to Kaiju Vision Radio.
All right, here we are at G-Fest. We're conducting yet another interview. This one it's kind of related, but it's a little bit different. We're here with
Daniel DiManna.
All right, and tell us what you've been up to.
Well, aside from not sleeping for the last couple of days and running around like a crazy person at G-Fest, I am here promoting my writing project, the Godzilla Novelization Project, which is a massive, very, very massive writing project on my part, an endeavor to novelize all of the Japanese Godzilla films and share them free with the fans, with Godzilla fans far and wide, and anybody who would like to read them.
So when you say you're doing the Japanese films, you're not doing any of the American films? So no
yeah.
G98, no G24.
Now, I will confess, I would love to do those. But the good news is those have been done for me. There are already novelizations. You can go on Amazon, you can buy 98, you can buy 2014, and all the sequels that will inevitably come out, Godzilla 2 next year, Godzilla vs. Kong. Somebody's doing those. And so you can go to the store and buy those. You can't go to the store and buy Godzilla vs. Destroya or All Monsters Attack. You can't do that. And even in Japan, you can't always get things like that. So there was a void that I thought should be filled. So I'm filling it as best I can.
And where do you hail from?
I hail from Little Sylvania, Ohio, near Toledo. I've lived there pretty much all my life. I was in Blissfield, Michigan very briefly for a while, but I'm back in Sylvania now, and it's about 4 and a pinch hours away from here. It's a nice little place. I love it a lot.
Yeah, you're not all that too far away.
Not too far at all, no.
Oh, that's really either.
Yeah.
So obviously this is a big undertaking for you.
Ooh, yes.
And so what are your previous writing credits and experiences and background?
Well, my only real writing, quote unquote, claim to fame is, claim to fame was back in 2016. I had the honor really of going to Japan and seeing Shin Godzilla on opening day. And I saw it again the next day. And I was actually, I was one of the first gaijin to see it. And I did a write-up on the film for G-Fan. And it ended up, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember which issue it was in. It was in one of the late 2016 ones. And it's the one where it's him on the cover and it says, more reviews. And I got a really long write-up in there. And I didn't necessarily want to review the film because everybody and their brother was reviewing the film. So I wrote a little bit about what I thought of it and just the experience of being in Japan to see the 12-year hiatus of the Japanese version of the character come back and to see the celebrations, seeing the red carpet opening and being, 10, 12 feet away from Hideaki Anno's weirdness. Which, it was incredibly surreal to see Japan celebrating the character and to see the promotions. And I got to visit some of the filming locations. I drove underneath the tunnel the Aqualine that gets crushed in the middle. And so I did a write-up on the experience, and I was really, really happy with that. I've also done a little bit of writing news-wise for sci-fi.com, which has been really, really fun. I haven't done that in a while, but it's one of those things where anybody can really post in editorial, so it's not really like, hey, you're awesome, you should do this. But I had a lot of fun reporting on things, and I've done some reviews that have showed up on the Kaiju Cast in the past, but really in terms of stuff that's appeared for other people to see, that's about it. Most of the rest of it's still in development.
So this is your first fiction project?
This is my first fiction project that I'm actively, and I have personal things that I'm doing that I could get published and not get sued for. But this is hopefully the beginning of something else, something really, really cool. Yeah.
So I read on your website, you had this very touching story about how this huge undertaking actually got started. Can you share that with our listeners, please?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Well, obviously, I've been a Godzilla fan since mastering potty training. It's pretty much been an indelible part of my life. It's a part of my like gigantus, part of my organic makeup, and it's something. It's in my cells. I love it to death, and I also have a great passion for reading. I'm a voracious reader. I read all the time. I sadly haven't sat down and read as much as I should in the last couple of years, but I love to read. I've got piles of books. And
I have the same problem.
Yes. Reading is the problem you want to have, though. That's a good problem to have. And I decided at one point or another that I really, really wanted to try to combine my love of monsters and science fiction and things like that with my own love of reading, and maybe try to do a little bit of creative writing and just kind of building worlds. And one of the earliest things that I did that actually kind of I'm not going to say it took off. It was a school project. Was a project that I did for an astronomy class way back in high school, where I was assigned to basically construct an entire planet's worth of organisms with very plausible, origins and food chains and all this stuff. And nobody took the class because they didn't want to do this project. They was like, oh, it's too crazy. And I was like, well, actually, back in 4th grade, I invented an entire planet full of aliens. So, and I did. So I dusted that stuff off, and I basically created an ecosystem, and I basically almost wrote a story around it. And I got an A+ on that project, and that project, thinking about it, really made me want to try to turn it into a story, which I was really, really happy about. So I started to tinker with it a little bit. And ultimately, my love of books and all that stuff brought me back again to Godzilla, which I really started to research in high school, the historical elements of everything, the people who are actually on screen, what their names were, the people behind the scenes. It was around that time that I first learned names like Koichi Kawakita and Eiji Tsuburaya and Haruo Nakajima. And I started to learn, I was like, okay, so that's that guy. And it just stuck in my brain. And this was at the same time where if somebody asked me to, do this math problem for the 10th time in a row, I would be like, give me a minute. But if they told me, the exact order every Godzilla film came out from 54 to 04, I'd be like, okay, strap in, I can do that. But basically, I had this kind of, moment where I thought to myself, there need to be Godzilla novels. And this, I was like 15. I was a child. And so I didn't really know what I was getting into. But I had this burst of excitement where I was like, I'm going to experiment and see with it and see what I can do with it. And so in the margins of the notebooks, you know what I mean? I just scrawled out I think I finished 2 prologues, Space Godzilla and King Ghidorah, because they were on my mind for some reason from the Heisei series. And I was actually kind of impressed with how they turned. I was 15 years old. I'd never written anything like that before. And eventually, being a 15-year-old, it was just too big a thing. So, the excitement kind of died off a little bit, and I stuck it on a shelf, and I was like, well, I should probably study. I should probably do that. And
you're in school, yeah.
I was in school, yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, of course. And I wasn't slacking off or anything like that, but I certainly was trying to balance it a little bit. And it just kind of got shelved, and I went on to college, and I have a bachelor's in fine arts from a little local school where I live. And during that time, and I don't want to speak too ill of everybody there because I did learn a lot of stuff, but the oddly enough, for it being an art school or an art department, it was a little repressive. If you didn't do things the way they wanted exactly, then you got failed. And I wanted to incorporate my own love of, certain things into the artwork I was doing. And it just felt very creatively restrictive without going down that rabbit hole. It just felt very, very creatively restrictive. And I didn't have a lot of time between work and school to do my own projects. And so when I graduated, I decided I was going to start trying to focus on some things. And over the years, this Godzilla novelization thing kept popping up in the back of my head. And I kept thinking to myself, is this even feasible? And if it were, how could I use it as a creative tool and kind of a healing thing for myself after college, and also use it as a way to maybe expand on elements of the films that maybe weren't fleshed out. I love film novelizations, and I love, one of my favorites is the 1933 Delos W. Lovelace novelization of the original King Kong. Yeah. Which is in the public domain now. And that's the reason a lot of Kong projects are popping up now, is because they're using that book as the basis. And you can always tell because there's little things. It's like, well, that character is different. It's called The Wanderer instead of The Venture, things like that. But I loved that book. And there are deleted scenes in there, like the spider pit sequence. Yeah. That didn't end up in the movie. So if you read the book, it's almost like you get a more complete picture of what the original plan was. And of course, the 1933 movie is beautiful and wonderful, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But if somebody said, "Hey, here's the spider pit footage," I'd stick it back in there.
I think everybody would.
Absolutely, yeah. Everybody would. Fans just are dying to see it, and it probably doesn't exist anymore, tragically. But those kind of things are preserved through writing. And the characters in Kong are wonderful, but you get into their heads a little bit more in the novel. And that's one of the things I really, really love about comic books and novels, is that, that idea of getting into the character's head and maybe seeing a different perspective. Because when you watch it, you can see a facial expression, you can see something like that, and you can think to yourself, okay, I think I know what this person's thinking or how they're feeling right now, but there's nothing quite like hearing it actually, And then I thought to myself, like, well, I'm just I'm a kid from Ohio. Who am I to put words into the minds of characters like Sakai from Mothra versus Godzilla? Who am I to tell you what Ichiro is thinking in All Monsters Attack? Like, who am I to do that? Is that even like, is it disrespectful? Is there like, where do I get, when does it become like too much? And I tossed it back and forth in my mind a lot. And eventually, what really inspired me to do it actually was my brother. My brother is, and he'll never admit it, he's a great writer himself. He actually writes video game and film reviews. He has a website called rantreviews.net. He is a wonderful writer. Again, he'd never tell you himself. But he's also, and this is the thing that really stuck out to me, my brother, and I love him to death, is a very, very critical person. And if he has an opinion on something, his mouth will not shut, but in a good way. And, if he has a problem with it or something that I've done or something like that, or if he's trying to critique me, he won't sugarcoat his opinions on it. He'll say, change that. And I don't have a problem with that. I encourage that because if it makes me better. So Aaron, my brother, kept over a course of 10 years, mentioning those Godzilla novels you were writing in high school. And he kept saying, dude, those were damn good. Those were really, really, really good. And I was like, they were little things I wrote in school. I was like, no, they were good. And again, he'll tell you when it's not good. And he kept telling me, you need to do more of that. You need to do more of that. And I'm like, well, if I want to be actually a writer, I can't publish these things. And he said, it doesn't matter, just do it. So when my brother started his website, and I basically took his kind words and the fact that he took the plunge and he started his writing empire. And I thought to myself, I think I can do this too. I'd like to try it. And I had wonderful encouragement from family and friends, and this love of the character, and the feeling that I understand the character and I understand the people that made it, and a desire to learn more, and the ability to admit to myself that I don't know everything and I want to learn more. And so I was like, darn it, I'm going to do it. I bit the bullet. I started the writing process on the first chapter of the original Gojira, so that when I launched the site, I would have some content. And I launched the site, and I put the chapter up, and that was in February of this year. So it's July. I'm not going to do the math, but it's been a few months.
5 months.
Thank you. I'm a writer. I'm not a mathematician. And it's been going nicely from there. So I owe a lot of like me getting over the initial trepidation of wanting to actually like saying, yes, I'm going to do this insane giant thing, to basically the wonderful people in my life who've been saying to me, just do it. Just do it. Just jump in and do it. What's the worst that could happen aside from sucking?
And it's funny, back in that age, you said it was about 15.
15, 16.
That's when things like that really take seed in your brain.
Yes.
And then if it's good enough, it keeps coming back in your head. Mm-hmm. And you can't let it go. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. How will this actually be feasible?
Exactly.
And then you start
this?
forming a path of how to actually accomplish it.
Exactly.
Going back, who are some of your like literary influences?
Oh man,
I know you're a huge reader.
I'm a huge reader. I love anything with Bradbury's name on it, I'll sit and read. Anything.
Yes.
Anything. In your panel earlier today, Harlan Ellison came up, and I mean, you can't go wrong with Harlan Ellison. I'm a Lovecraft guy. There's just so many. I grew up reading. Obviously Harry Potter. Loved the Harry Potter books. J.K. Rowling is awesome, and man, and a lot of my favorite storytellers are. I love good writers. I love Dean Koontz because I love a lot of things about Dean Koontz. I love thrillers and things like that, and the mystery. I love the way he builds up the characters. But one of the things I really love, and this is something that's really, really influenced me, is that he writes, at least in my mind, very, very cinematically. When I read books, when everybody reads books, they try to see it in their head. Yeah. I see things very, very vividly when I read, to the point where sometimes and I think a lot of people do this as well, as they cast their characters with familiar faces if you don't have a picture to go off of. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like okay, there's a face from my life somewhere. Yeah.
That's actually something I do with my own fiction. I pick out actors and I keep the pictures on my computer, so I'll reference them real quick. And oh, that's what you look like.
I love that. About 1 million years ago, when I was a little kid, I loved reading Catherine Lasky's Ga'Hoole books, the Owls. I don't know if you guys ever read those, but they were like for middle schoolers. And when I was a kid, I read them, and it's a great story about basically like owl warriors, and they were anthropomorphized. They weren't like physically anthropomorphized, but they had a culture, and they talked and they wrote. And there was a character in one of those books. He was like this grizzled old piratey guy, and every time I read the book, I heard Jeffrey Rush's Barbossa voice. And then this is the best part. In 2011, I believe, they made the movie. Guess who they cast as that character? They got him to play it. So I'm watching the movie, and he's doing his Barbossa voice, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, they got into my head, and they did it. So I definitely do that. Yeah. And so making the graduation from basically hearing the stories to writing a story that already exists with a face and a voice in the Godzilla films is kind of a natural jump from there, I think.
So besides reading the scripts and watching the movies, which I love, subtitles, I turn the subtitles on for nearly every single thing that I watch. Yeah, because I love reading the script as I'm going along. Oh yeah. But besides those two things, how are you researching for the project?
Oh, I'm doing. There's a couple of other things. Definitely, like the search for the scripts is interesting. I'm still trying to track down a couple of those things, and then making sure that they're accurate. And again, subtitle. That's the thing, is you can't always trust the subtitles. Which is
the dreaded dub titles.
The dreaded dun 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 freaking dub titles, man. They're the bane of anyone who's trying to understand the films, truly understand the film's existence. And some of them are close enough, but with something like what I'm doing here, I'm aiming for as accurate as I can get. And so, and then you've got something like the Sony GMK DVD and Blu-ray, where it's just inexcusable, and Tokyo SOS, and it's just it's hard to sit down and watch these things and know how inaccurate it is, and how so much of the the subtlety, especially in GMK, Shusuke Kaneko's ambition with that film. And we had a discussion about this the other night, where we were talking about the scene with the Chinese man being translated, and how the dub titles changed it into something very, very not
discovering
at all what
Kaneko
intended. Yeah, and it changes that entire scene, and it changes the entire chunk of the movie, if you really think about it, because instead of that weird moment of dark comedy, you get this great moment of national cooperation, and it's not really like cooperation, but it's encouragement, and it's a sign. It's good progress for it's like considering the history of the two countries we're talking about here,
person to person level.
Yeah, and that's really what's real. Yeah, and that reality of it is really beautiful, and that's what's going to that's what'll change the world. And I think that's what Kaneko was trying to say. But no one who goes and buys the movie, a more casual fan that goes and buys the movie on DVD or Blu-ray, is going to know that.
No, they're just going to be like, well, that was weird.
You're going to die, no. And it's funny, but it's like I have the same problem with Godzilla 1985, and we talked about this as well. And that was more deliberate. And, understatement to end all understatements. But GMK may have just been lazy. It could have been intentional. Maybe there was something going on. Who knows? But either way, it exists as it does. And that being the case, I cannot use the subtitles for my research for that film. I won't do it. Same with, Tokyo SOS is straight dub titled. I can't put that disc in as research. So I have to go and I have to try to find other ways to figure out what they were saying. Right now I have a friend of a friend who I'm going to be getting in contact with here soon, who is fluent in Japanese, writing, reading, and speaking, and she's going to help me with some of the translations. Hopefully that goes through. But in addition to analyzing the scripts, I'm also analyzing and watching the movies very, very closely. I'm compiling shot lists, so that I don't have to watch them all the time, and I can look and say, here's a transition to this, here's a transition to that, so that I can try to translate it into a shift in perspective in the story, and maybe where to put a break in, or maybe where to put a chapter in. And I'm also doing a lot of historical research, and I'm proud to say, not kissing up at all, that your podcast is very, 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 very helpful in that. And I've done a lot of research on, I've done a lot of research on this stuff over the last 10 years. I've got mounds of books. I've got all this crazy, crazy stuff. And I was, it's funny, about a couple months ago, I was at a used bookstore with my girlfriend, and we were in the history section, and we were like, okay, well, blah, 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 some interesting stuff there, some interesting stuff there. And then she turned around and she's like, Dan, where are you? She's way ahead of me, and I'm staring at the, World War II, A-bomb section.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's a little, I feel morbidly awkward being this interested in reading the testimony of someone who, you know, lived through something that awful and horrific, but you got to go there. And like for Godzilla, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, and because I think there's a moment where it'll come up, is getting into the headspace of these films is also very, very important, because some of the research I do is entirely mental. And by that I mean I have to be kind of in the world of that film. Because to me, it's like the script is important, the visuals are important, the characters, like all that stuff is very important. And one of the most important things to me is being able to kind of put myself into that world, into that universe almost,
and
just kind
of in there.
Kind of existing within the same space as the characters and looking and seeing the things they would have seen. And then how would I describe it? You know what I mean? And then I think to myself, well, when I'm looking at the aftermath of a typhoon, am I going to describe it the same way Sakai does? Am I going to grab a camera like Junko? Am I going to be the politician who's like, now I'll get it cleaned up. It's fine. I got the pumps. I'm going to put like 1,000 more pumps up. It's fine. We're going to hit the deadline. You know, how do I look at the tragedy? And then Gojira as well. And again, there's that idea of being on the entire opposite end of the planet where these very, very culturally relevant political things took place. And, you know, on a certain level, I'm not going to know what it was like to live in 1950s Japan with the fear that the memories of this horrific thing that happened 9 years earlier, 1954. And having the fear of the tests happening right off my shore. And the fact that I can't eat the fish, you know, like I can empathize. I think that's another strength that I have, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm kind of empathetic to a fault sometimes, and I empathize with like my family and friends and people and all that stuff. But I have a lot of empathy to fictional characters when when my head's in that space and I'm in that world, and I think that's an important part too. But again, like there's always gonna be that separation, time period, time distance, physical distance, cultural difference. There's always gonna be that gap. And the research that I'm doing and just reading up on the history is really, really important. The economics are important. The politics is important. Being in the headspace of the common man at that time is important. So reading journals of people that, may have been around at that time and trying to find books like that for research is really, really important. The goal is to try to get that distance between 21st century nerd and 1950s A-bomb survivor, or just someone living in that time, like one of the like a kid that may have grown up and maybe their father died in the war or something like that, or maybe even in 1960s Japan and being watching the economic miracle take place and watching the country just explode and seeing it happen, seeing the 1964 Olympics and all that way that changed the country.
It sort of reset the country in a way.
Absolutely.
And say, now we're finally back.
Yeah.
One of my best friends, his grandfather was one of the doctors that the United States sent to Hiroshima to help after the war to help take care of people. And
that's unbelievable.
You can only imagine what he saw.
Yeah.
And you want to try to put yourself into his head and then imagine in his words how to put that together.
How do you do that? And again, some of the films require more of that than others, like Gojira. And again, I'll talk. This will come up again later. Having my head in the world of that film for a long time was just, and I've been there before, but like actually getting into it and writing it was a very depressing place to be.
Yeah,
it was a very, very depressing place to be. It's such a dark film, entertaining of course, but just so thick and deep. And actually, and I read one of the things I did a lot before I started the first chapter, was I read testimonials of the Daigo Fukuryu Maru passengers and the family members of Kobayashi, the radio man who passed from poison. Who's the first victim.
Yeah.
And I read about and I actually learned a couple of new things. I'd read a lot about it before, but I learned a lot of interesting things I didn't know before. But like the ash coming down and how they caught it on their tongues like snowflakes.
Yeah.
Reading about they caught it on their tongues like snowflakes because they didn't know. They threw it at each other like snowballs. They rolled it up. And then, of course, hours later, they were heaving over the end of the boat. And it's a miracle that they, all of them did live to the shore. And, of course, one of them did sadly pass away, but not too long after that. But it's just a miracle. Like it's so amazing hearing those stories because you can't find the Daigo Fukuryu Maru incident in a textbook in American schools anyway. I mean, I've tried. It's a footnote. It ought not be because it's very, very significant. But to Godzilla fans, it's certainly not insignificant. It's, which is one of the great things about the series, is that it gives a great perspective into the culture and the history of it. It's a great, I don't want to say the word excuse, but it kind of is in a good way to learn about it.
Yeah, each one of those movies, as we illustrate in our podcast, it's a snapshot of Japan.
That's a good word.
At that moment.
Yeah, moment. It's a window.
Yeah, and which is why it's very interesting to go through them chronologically and just see how things change. I mean, you look at 54, and then you jump ahead 2 movies.
Yes.
2 movies. Now, mind you, there's a 7-8 year gap.
Yeah,
there.
Where they experiment.
It's a big time jump.
Yeah.
But you just jump ahead 2 movies, and we've gone from dark, depressing allegory to a straight up satirical comedy.
Yeah.
I mean,
and a great one at that. But it's like that leap is incredible. And of course, if you've watched, H-Man through Mothra, that 7 year gap in the middle there, including 55 H-Man, not H-Man, half human, half H-Man as well. But like going through that cycle of the experimentation cycle is what I like to call it, where they were kind of playing with the formula, and they were like, okay, well, we'll do this, and then we'll try alien invasion, but we'll put a monster in. We'll try alien invasion without the monster. We'll do this, we'll do that, and then ultimately arriving at the brilliance of Mothra. And the revelation of Shinichi Sekizawa, which completely transformed the rest of that decade into the 70s, the entire genre from then on out. The man who changed it,
and kept changing the formulas.
Yeah, and we were talking about that yesterday, Nate and I, and I may have accidentally coined the phrase "get your Sekizawa on," which I should probably be a T-shirt at some point.
Yeah, really.
If you make that, you're put that on the back of your novelization Godzilla Novelization Project T-shirt, I will buy the snot out of it.
Absolutely.
Well, I will buy it and I will wear the snot out of it.
Oh yeah, I think that could be a hit. I have to jot that one down. But yeah, to me, it's all to wind that question up. It's about that distance between me and time period and culture, and just trying to make that distance as small as I can. And I'm never gonna, I'm holding my hands out for the, great listening. I'm holding my hands out. I'll never make my hands meet completely, but if I can get as close as I possibly can as a writer, as a creative person, as a fan, then I think it'll make better books. It'll make better reading. And my number one goal in all of this, and this will probably come up again, is honoring the people who made these films and the intention with which they made them.
Which takes empathy.
Yes. So again, not tooting my own horn, but it is a strength that I like to think is helping make these novels readable to other human beings.
So how long do you think it will take in order to finish this project?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's a lot of factors that play into something like that. Individual books might take less or more time to do. I have a job. I work third shift right now at a place to keep a modest roof over my head, so I got to work on that. And then there's extenuating circumstances that no one might know about. And then there's the research that goes into it. There's sometimes acquiring new things and waiting to have enough dough to actually be able to get those things. So each novel will probably take a different amount of time to do. The entire novelization project, I'm no fool, will take years and years and years. And this is not something I'm going to start in February and begin in January of next year.
Which really shows how much dedication you have.
Yeah, this is not something I'm just going to throw out there.
Yeah, you're in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. I am in it for the long haul, and it's. And I think one of the main reasons I'm able to do this is it requires thinking very hard about it, but it also requires not thinking hard about it at all. And by that, I mean, if I think too hard about what I have committed to do, then I'm going to crumble under the pressure of it. I'm going to be like, well, this is going to be years and years and years and years. It's going to require a lot of money. It's going to require a lot of time. It's going to require writing and rewriting and doing all this stuff. And if I stop and think about that too hard,
then you're going to freeze yourself.
I'm going to freeze.
Yeah.
No, legitimate. I will freeze and I will look at it and I'll be like, I can't do it, and I'll just be like, nah, it was nice while it lasted. I got 4 chapters out, and for one of the books, it's fine. I'll just stop it. Everybody can enjoy that. But as long as I keep focused on the empathy, as you said, the passion that I have for wanting to make this as good as I can, doing the research, and above all, enjoying the process, because there's not been it's a lot of work. There's not been a single part of it I haven't liked. I haven't loved.
Yeah. And one of the things that intrigues me, talking about how long you think it's gonna take, is you're going about this actually a little bit differently than I would have expected or what I would have done. You're not starting with Godzilla 54, finishing that book, going on to raids again, or something like that, going chronological like we did with the podcast.
Yes,
you're jumping around and doing it piecemeal. You'll be like, I'm going to write a chapter in Godzilla 54, and then next week I'm going to do Godzilla versus King Ghidorah.
Yes.
A chapter of that, and then I'll do Mechaguirus, and then you're going all over the place.
Oh yes.
I'm curious why you chose to do it that way.
There's a couple of literally two very good, at least in my brain, reasons for doing that. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I want to discuss. Because to me, looking at the website and looking at the way I operate, even to me, it looks weird. And I'm just like, I'm going to write this one, and then I'm going to write this one, I'm going to write this one. And there's two reasons for that. One of which is very early on, and that won't last for a long time because one of my goals right now is to create that content for the site, good content. Content that has taken time, but I'm trying to create varied content for the site because if somebody might not want the heaviness of Gojira, they might want to sit down and read All Monsters Attack. They might be really nostalgic for one of the films or another. So I'm kind of jumping around and giving a little bit of a different flavor of different things you can expect the project to tackle because, of course, all the Godzilla films are very different tonally, so the writing should be too. So if I can show that I can write serious heavy, and then I can jump to Megalon and just go nuts. You know what I mean? And I can, because, I love Megalon. And one of the key aspects of this project, I'm not going to lie, is the ability to look at all these films, and it kind of in the similar way that you guys do, and take them seriously and look at them seriously, even the goofiest, doofiest ones. But we all love the goofiest, doofiest ones anyway. The serious ones.
It's amazing what you can find.
It's amazing how the goofy, doofy ones sometimes have this incredible depth to them. Yesterday we discussed Gigan, and I didn't know some of those things, and my mind was blown. And even Megalon's got stuff in it. And a lot of that to me is about there's some obviously political and economic stuff, but a lot of that is very fascinating to me about the Japanese film industry at the time and how it was suffering terribly. But proving, long story short, basically part one is I'm basically creating varied content so that there's more than just one thing for people to read. And I'm also kind of proving that I can do goofy, I can do serious, I can do hard sci-fi, I can do fantasy, I can do fairy tale. I can do something like that. I can do anything like that. And I'm not so much to everybody else, but to me. It's more of an experimentation. I'm just like, I wonder if I can jump from this to this. Because there's a Godzilla for all seasons, as I like to say, because there's the hard sci-fi, there's the horror.
There's a Godzilla for everyone.
There's a Godzilla for everyone. There's a Godzilla for every era. There's a Godzilla for every genre. There's a Godzilla for, and it's just going to keep going. I mean, we got a cartoon plant Godzilla right now. Like try telling that to Sekizawa. He wouldn't have believed it. Tell it to Honda. It's like, but it all works, and it's all somehow equally as valid. Allegorical Dark Godzilla, superhero Godzilla, force of nature Godzilla, avenging spirit Godzilla, should probably be Biolante Godzilla, and it's all different. And you've got a crazy Hideaki Anno Godzilla, it's all like, you keep going and going and going, but it's all, each is as valid as the other. And so you have to approach it from that angle as well. So writing Megalon, you gotta attack it like you attack the original Godzilla, which sounds so weird when you say it because they're two entirely different things. And then part two of that is a little bit more personal. Why I have it so varied like that. It actually aids in my writing process a lot. And thereby hangeth the tale. So when I first started, I did start with Gojira, and I got 2 chapters out of the gate, and I have chapter 3. I haven't touched it in a long time. I have chapter 3 partially written, has not been posted yet. But for about 2 or 3 weeks, I was, as I said before, in the headspace of that film. I was on the boat. Like I said before, I read the Daigo Fukuryo Maru Lucky Dragon guy's testimonies before I read chapter 1. And I even like the measurements of was it the Bingo Maru? That's the second boat. Whatever that first boat, Eiko Maru in Gojira. Yeah. The measurements that I put in the number of crew members that the boat could hold in the chapter, that's exactly from the Lucky Dragon. I basically just took those and I put them in there because the reference was obvious in the film. So I thought, why not make it more specific? And if you catch it, then they'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it was such a depressing place to be because I was legitimately like, I was up late, like reading these testimonials, and I was like staring at the subtitles, and I was jumping back and forth between all these things, and my brain was just starting to get like really, really sad. And I was just like, I'm going to lose my mind. I have to get up and take a break from this. I need a breather. And so instead of doing what normal humans do when they use the words take a breather, I instead flipped to another Microsoft Word document, and I started to take notes on another movie, just so that I could kind of see, okay, well, this is a little bit different. I'll try this. Long story short, about an hour and a half later, I had the prologue to All Monsters Attack, Godzilla's Revenge, done. Completely done on the website. And I really wanted to post it on the website with the Emperor Palpatine, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one meme. Because it's exactly what it was. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was just like, I got to get away from Godzilla for a little bit, because I was so like messed up, but I didn't feel like I was writing it very well, which is why I've rewritten chapter 3 a few times. And I find that has repeated as I've gone on. If I stick my head too deep into the world of one particular story for too long, I start to get like, it's very
tunnel
hard
vision.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it. It's kind of hard to describe. Tunnel vision works, but it's like narrative tunnel fiction. Uh-huh. It's very, very unusual. And as I do that, I start feeling, and like, as it's happening, my writings start to suffer. And I've gone back into a couple of those chapters, which have not been posted for other books, and I've reread them, and I'm like, nope, that something was going on here. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I need to step away, and then I'll tackle this one instead. So the variation on the site, again, it serves the purpose of providing variety on the site and showing that I can do different genres, but it's also helping me a lot with the creative process, because if I sat and stared at Gojira for, any longer, and I posted chapter 3 would have not been up to the standards I wanted it to be. So I felt I should switch to something else. And of course, Godzilla's Revenge is the exact opposite. So and I can't believe that's the one I picked, but I'm sure it's no coincidence that it is very, very, and then that one I haven't touched for a while either, because that one, again, talk to more casual fans. They're going to be like, oh, it's about a little kid. It's not, why is it that hard? And then you'd have no idea.
That one's actually
that one
really
is
tough.
So deep. And that one, it's very, very tough. So I have I have the next couple of chapters outlined and partially written for those, but I'm still researching the era, and I'm still researching a couple of other things. And there's and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the movie or the director, but there's a movie that came out around the same time. That's and I apologize to people who know what I'm talking about and are screaming at their phones or computers right now, but it's a film that came out around the same time, and it's very similar, and it's about a little boy, yellow baseball cap, and he has very similar fantasies, and so it's not, Godzilla's Revenge is not an isolated incident. This was a thing that was happening. Obviously, it was reflecting the culture, but there were other films coming out that were kind of dealing with the exact same thing. And I think maybe watching those films without the sci-fi context might give me a little bit more of an insight into the actual world that the film was in, because, I've seen Godzilla's Revenge 9,000 times, but it's one of those movies where you pick something else up every time you see it, at least for me, that I didn't catch. But if I could once I figure out the name of that movie, and it's on the tip of my tongue, I need to track that down. I need to watch it, and a couple of other ones, just to get the other side of the story. So it's not the kaiju, which will be a little sad. I love my kaiju, but a lot of history in that. So I need to do that to make the book better.
Along those lines, have you seen the movie Tideland?
No, I have not.
By Terry Gilliam. Oh my gosh.
No, that one I haven't seen.
It involves a girl who goes into imagination land, sort of stuff back and forth. And it reminded me, I swear Gilliam has seen a lot of Godzilla stuff.
I think he has. I'm sure he has. Yeah.
But it reminded me a lot of All Monsters Attack.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing, even though Tideland's a very updated version of it with some new things going on. But it's still, like, it totally messes around with the idea of, the way that we look at reality.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you say that, because as I was going through the research process for Godzilla's Revenge, I came to an interesting kind of perspective realization that the film is a fairy tale. And I thought, because I was watching it, I'm like, gosh, there's a little Wizard of Oz in here. There's a little, it has that same feeling of Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland. One of my all-time favorites, Spirited Away. Love that film.
Yeah.
Wonderful film.
Wonderful film. Labyrinth, where you have the child character who's in a a real world setting that is is unkind to them and does not foster dreams. And then they go into a world, whether it's in their mind or not, is depending on which film you're talking about, ambiguous. It's in Ichiro's case, it's very depressing because it's definitely his dreams. But maybe Dorothy did go to Oz. Maybe there is a Wonderland. Maybe there is a labyrinth with David Bowie wandering around singing. Maybe Chihiro goes into the spirit world, into the bathhouse. And they come out, they see in them, they see reflections of themselves and people in their real lives, mother, father, friend, what a bully, in that fantasy world. And then when they're shot back out the other end at the end of the story, or periodically, as in the case of Destroy All Monsters, All Monsters Attack, they've grown up a little bit and they've learned a little bit about the real world thanks to their fantasy experience. So Godzilla's Revenge you don't watch it as a fantasy, but it kind of is one in that sense. Mm-hmm. But it's a real world one because it takes, in my opinion, it takes place in the real world, in a world where kaiju are film, is a film phenomenon. Ichiro is a member of the audience to me. He's the viewer. He's the child that would, go and buy the monster toy, which is why, and I love the moment in the film when Eisei Yamamoto, as the inventor, Anami, is the toy inventor says he's showing his kiddie computer to Ichiro, yes. And Ichiro says, you should put the monster roars in this because that would be really cool. And he starts going blah at the camera, and Anami kind of laughs at it and goes, maybe. And Dave Kalat once wrote, and I'm a big fan of his book, Critical History and Filmography of Toho's Godzilla series.
That was a big source of information for us.
That is that is my Godzilla Bible. So I love that book to death, both versions. And he writes in that chapter, pretty much word for word, most Godzilla fans would want to buy that toy, that supercomputer toy thing, if it made the monster roars. You know what I mean? So that's definitely something in the audience for the kids. It's like if they put that toy out, kids would be like, I would totally buy something that made monster roars. So Ichiro is the audience. Mm-hmm. He's us, you know what I mean? And then you go into the fantasy world, and Minira is Ichiro. He's that character. Ichiro's dad is Godzilla to a sense. And of course, Gabra is obvious. And, you can draw parallels to the other things in there. But it is, when you boil it down, it's kind of a fantasy. Kind of in the similar vein of the stranger in a strange land, going to the fantasy world that, shoots you back out the other end a little bit more mature.
Like Never Ending Story.
Yes. Never Ending Story is another excellent example of that. And I love movies like that. So I started thinking to myself, man, could I write the story and not tell you to your face, you are reading a fantasy, but just, kind of include little bits of that, right, just to kind of make it read not like Alice in Wonderland specifically, but something in that vein. And of course, at that point, I got to I was through chapter 1 or 2 on that one, and I haven't posted those yet. There's only a prologue, and I thought, maybe I need to go back and redo a part of that. So I did. So I left that book and I jumped to another one. And right now I'm kind of going back and filling in the blanks. I held a poll on Twitter a while ago to ask some of my readers, what the next book should be. And Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla from 2002 was the winner. So I think, don't necessarily quote me on this, but I think that's going to be the last one I start for a while. Just so that's a nice broad range, I think. I might start 1 or 2 more just to get them out there, so I'll have maybe 10 or 11 started on the site. And that will show, because I've got original Godzilla started. I've got Megalon started, Gigan started, King Kong versus Godzilla started, and Mothra versus Godzilla started. And then I'll have Mechagodzilla from 2002, and I might throw a Heisei one in there just from a little bit more variety. And it kind of covers the bases. And I've got Trippy Hedera started, which don't get me started on the challenge of that one. But
yeah, you've sort of got a lot of different Godzilla channels that you can tune yourself into.
If I can do at least one of each to kind of show that I can pull it off, or at least I have potential to pull it off, I think it'll help. And like I said, it helps me to jump from one to another and then go back with a set of fresh eyes. It's like looking because I'm an artist too. I'm not the best artist, but I learned very quickly that if you because my art classes were sometimes 8 hours long. And if you're staring with your face 2 or 3 inches away from your drawing for 2 or 3 hours, you start to get cross-eyed. You got to look up. You got to focus on something in the distance. You got to stretch. and you got to go do something else for a while and then come back to it. So that's kind of what I've applied to this in a way.
It seems like you're essentially honing your own skill of self-criticism.
Yes.
Which is something you have to work on.
Yes. And I'm my own worst critic. I'm very hard on myself when I write.
all artists, all writers, critics.
Everybody is. Everybody, every artist, every writer.
You have somebody that you can actually show something to.
Yes.
And then get the... That way you're able to sort of come up for air.
Yes, exactly. And I have, and again, I mentioned at the beginning, I have a very, very supportive family. I have a brother whose support and his kindness just means the world to me. He really, really is one of the big reasons I decided to take the plunge and do this. I have, my parents, obviously, step-parents. Right now, my girlfriend loves to listen to me read them out loud to her, and which is really cool.
Excellent work.
Yes.
Excellent work. Always read your work out loud.
Yes.
That was one of the best bits of writing advice I ever got.
Yes. And there's been one or two chapters that, just for one reason or another, I put up without reading them out loud. I'm just like, okay, I should put this up. And then, of course, I reread them again. There's a typo. Got to go fix that. And I think to myself every single time, why am I not reading these things out loud? And I read them out loud to myself a lot. But reading them out loud to another person is always really helpful to me. And no one else in my family is nearly as insane about this stuff as I am. Godzilla stuff. They support me wholeheartedly though, and they sit and listen to things that they probably don't. I mean, they care about me. They care about the writing, but the films aren't their favorite. But they endless support, endless in good constructive criticism. Mm-hmm. Got to have constructive criticism. Mm-hmm.
Our next couple of questions are somewhat related.
Okay.
Obviously, there's some crazy stuff that goes on in a lot of these movies. These are films, obviously. They're a visual medium.
Yes.
Prose is very different. And it's the same sort of challenge that any author who gets the assignment to adapt a film into a novelization has to face this and figure out how to do it, because they're two very different mediums.
Yes.
So how would you try to address something like, I don't know, Godzilla and Anguirus talking to each other in Godzilla vs. Gigan, or some of the... Can you think of an example, Brian? One of the more unusual things in the films.
Oh man,
Godzilla vs. Hedorah from minute zero to the end credits.
Yeah. The protest part of Hedorah, with the concert and everything, there's a way that you can put that together in your head, but you want to be able to get it just right.
Yeah. So for things like that, how have you done it so far, and how do you think you're gonna do it in the future when you get to those?
Yes, another great question. And I'm gonna run with Hedorah on this because that is a great example. I'm a prologue and 4 chapters into Hedorah. That's the longest one on the site so far. I've gone in and revised it a little bit because I found a couple things I wasn't crazy about, but I'm getting it there. It looks pretty good so far, and I've put a lot of work into it, and on one level, I couldn't tell you why, because I love the movie. It's one of my favorites. But it's insane. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that it's insane. But here's the thing about the insanity of that movie. It's insane for a purpose. It's so avant-garde and artsy that when you see the weird things like the pulse, like the LSD tripping, I think he was tripping on acid or LSD or something like that, and he sees the fish heads, the fish imagery in the movie. The movie uses a lot of fish symbolism. The fish heads, the fish tank, the dead fish in the water, like all that stuff's there. The random black and white sequence from the scene you were just talking about, the weird old guys staring, even the dancing skeletons on the screen, or the political cartoons,
and also how the child has that connection,
the weird connection. He's dreaming him into it. Yeah, it's very, very all of those things. A lot of those things they're very, very ambiguous. Very ambiguous, some of them, and some of them are for such a movie that's people have used the word ham-fisted a lot with that one, because it basically takes pollution is bad and shoves it down your throat. But the imagery of the film can be very, very up to interpretation. We just talked about the old guys in the woods. I've heard, the prevailing theory is that they're village elders or something that live nearby, and they're just disapproving of the new generation partying, and also lighting a fire on top of a mountain to protest a monster that eats carbon dioxide, which is in smoke. Good thinking, teenagers. But,
it really kind of talks about how the the faults of the protest movement, and it's very critical at a time when critical. You really wouldn't expect that.
You wouldn't expect it, and B, the movies. This is interesting. The movies were being largely made for teenagers and kids at the time, so the movie bites the hand that feeds it in a weird way. It basically like the scene where Yukio gets slapped in the face with the acid. It's like throwing acid in the face of the people in the audience, because most adults weren't going to see Godzilla in 1971. Teenagers were going, parents that were dragging their kids along, and their kids were probably horrified at that one. Like, why is the baby sinking into the slime, Mommy? Well, it's a metaphor, dear. I'll explain it later. But again, like, the movie is so thick with that stuff, and there's two parts of that. A, it's visual, because you can't, like, writing a black and white scene that's about a minute long. How do you approach that? Do you use descriptive terms to imply sepia tones and just like dourness and sadness and depression? What do you do? And then you've got the political cartoons with him drinking the oil and the face masks that turn into the map. Like that, and there's no dialogue there. Like, how do you write that? And I thought to myself, like, at what point do I stop incorporating these things into a narrative that is readable to humans? Because, like, the movie is, like, almost beyond a human's ability to, like, rationalize certain parts of it. So, like, how am I supposed to write it? And I will be perfectly honest, some of that stuff I haven't figured out yet. But one thing I'm experimenting with, and I could always change it later, but it is in chapter 3 of the novel that is up now. I wrote an entire chapter basically about, and it doesn't happen in the movie, but it incorporates things that do, because a lot of the movie is radio. You hear the radio on, you hear the TV on a lot. The news is reporting on the latest Hedra attack, and I really liked those things because it made it feel kind of very, very real, like something was happening, and like the photographs on the TV were really, really cool. And I thought, how do I put that in the narrative? Somebody has to be watching it. I have to have somebody watching the TV. So I have Professor Yano, waking up in pain after his attack and, going out into the living room, because I've been having a lot of fun actually writing Yano. I get into his head a lot. I don't have him actually italicize his thoughts or anything. At least I haven't yet. I might change that. But I've been getting into his headspace and about how petrified the attack has made him, about how when he sees the pictures on the television screen, every time he closes he can't sleep. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees those red Hedera eyes coming towards him. And it's like he's basically at PTSD.
Yeah, post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's like he's horrified, but he has to know what the thing is, and that's why he's so driven to find out. And so he gets up and he's like, I know I shouldn't, but I can't sleep. My body's in pain. Every instinct is telling me to sleep, but I can't. I have to watch the TV and find out more. So he sits down, and I incorporated that, these tanker disasters could be the result of the Hedra. And then it cuts to the first political cartoon where he guzzles the purple slime amidst the sea of dead sharks and fish. And it goes untranslated in the English version, but the characters for the word cheerful over Hedera's shoulder that dissipate into the smog and obscure the sun, which then cuts to the bright sun and Godzilla walks in. And I thought, I love those political cartoons, but they don't, how do I put that in there? So I basically wrote them as political cartoons. Yano looks away from the TV, and when he looks back up, some time has passed. And that he sees that political cartoon on the television. And he's like, what is this? And he's like, this is very, very strange. I think I get where they're going here. But, so I'm admitting in the story that it's a very strange thing. But I also found a way to put it into the narrative where I'm not just cutting to, now I'm describing this cartoon. How am I supposed to write that this is a cartoon? So I have somebody watching it just like a viewer would. And I think it worked.
It sounds like it works. I haven't read that part.
Yeah, it seems like it worked. I might go in and change a little bit of the verbiage here and there. The real test will be getting the other political cartoons creamed in there, because they've got the one where Hedera flies in and then flies off, and then you've got the map face that I talked about. So if I can get those incorporated into the narrative in some way, and I said this before, one of my big things is honoring the vision of the directors, and if any of the Godzilla directors can be said to have had a vision, it's Yoshimitsu Banno. His vision, and because he wrote the thing, he co-wrote it, and obviously directed it, it was his story. That film is his baby. That movie is so him. Just like there's the original Godzilla, and a lot of those films are so Honda. You can watch those films and you can say yeah, that's Honda, that's Honda, that's Honda. Not just directorial stuff, but story stuff. Hedera is so unbelievable. It could have come from only one brain, and it was Yoshimitsu Banno. And Yoshimitsu Banno, if I'm going to write the story, I got to know to the best of my ability, of course, like where he was going with this stuff and why it was significant, how it's significant, and what's up with the old guys. In that order, like like the old
men always come back.
The old men always come back. They always watch you, and they're always really creepy. And I've heard theories that they might be like spirits of the dead that are like disapproving of the ancestors that have come back. And I don't know about that, but it's interesting to think about it. Like, you know, and how do I even write that in there? Like, because I have to address it. And is there a way I can address it that's ambiguous, just like the film is? Because I don't feel like, and again, I'm doing this as an enthusiast and as a fan, but also as somebody who has a lot of respect for the people who created these films. Do I have the right as somebody to go in there and tweak it, you know, and say that's exactly what the guys were doing there when Bono really seemed to be putting them there ambiguously? Like, does that deserve an answer from? Am I the guy to give that answer? You know, and I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, it'd be fun for me to answer it, but when there's so much intentional ambiguity from such an artistic director who's trying to make such a big statement, like, I don't feel like I should do that. You know what I mean? So like tackling things like that and like some of the weirder aspects of these things is funny. I actually, and this is a good story. I had a friend on Twitter, a reader. He likes to give me ideas for future stories. And, he hasn't in a while. If you're listening, you need to give me more stories. You'll know who you are in a second. He gave me a great idea for Gigan that really made me laugh. Because we were joking back and forth about trying to figure out a way to write in the fact that Mothra and Rodan show up in that movie via stock footage mistakes.
Yes.
And it was like,
that is true.
How are you going to do Rodan lying stoned on the ground next to Godzilla when he gets up, or like Mothra showing up in the corner? And I just like, you know what? Darn it, that's a good question. And he's like, maybe Godzilla gets bonked on the head and he starts like hallucinating previous allies. And he was like, I know that's a dumb idea. And I was like, actually. Pardon me. And I laughed my butt off. It was like 11 at night and I was in my bed and I was like, that's amazing. So you know what? That might end up in the book, just as a joke. Because at a certain point, and I've said it before, but you have to take, like I said it before, taking these things seriously is paramount. But if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And sometimes your tongue has got to be planted firmly in your cheek, but in a respectful way that still takes it seriously, like balancing the taking the project seriously and also just having fun with it.
Well, and that's an appropriate film to be tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
because it's Sekizawa.
It's Sekizawa, and the guy was the master of tongue in cheek. And even with Gigan, which is a film that he didn't really even want to do. You know what I mean? They kind of roped him into it, and thank God they did, because the story is great. The characters are Sekizawa, so of course the characters are wonderful.
There's so much charm going on.
It's a good word. Gigan is legitimately one of the most charming ones, and I wrote this in my little intro on the blog post, the update that I do on the main website page, where it was like the film was actually, for as cheap as it was kind of a bold experiment in a lot of ways. It's like, well, Hedorah didn't work according to Tomoyuki Tanaka. It didn't do this. It didn't do that. How do we don't have any of our A-list golden age actors anymore. We don't have Eiji Tsuburaya. We don't have, component A, B, C, and we don't have all these things. We have no money. We don't even have a composer. How are we gonna how are we gonna make a film, and B, we want to bring it back to the heyday, the golden age, the classics, the 60s films. We want it to feel like Mothra versus Godzilla. We want it to feel like Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. We want it to feel like Astro Monster. Monster Zero, big time. Like lots of Monster Zero in there. And how do we make it feel like that without those players, without the this and that? And darn it if they didn't pull it off. You know what I mean? Like they used Ifukube stock music, but a lot of it wasn't even from Godzilla films. Yeah. And the ones that feel so appropriate. And the characters are great. Sekizawa did wonderful. The characters are memorable. They're so memorable. And I mean, who doesn't remember Corn Cob Guy? I mean,
the Japanese hippie.
Japanese hippie Corn Cob Man. I mean, and who doesn't love Gengo? I mean, as an artist, I love Gengo for a number of reasons. Yeah. He's a goof. He's serious when he needs to be. He's funny when he needs to be. He not overacts, but overreacts. When he's running up the stairs, and then of course you've got karate kicking Tomoko, who beats the crap out of everybody while the guys are cowering in the corner. Very progressive, and she's a little scary, and people are a little nervous around her. And
except the hippie guy actually. The hippie guy mugs Gengo with a banana. Yeah. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
And he passes out. Tomoko would have swung around and kicked him in the face or somewhere worse. But
the overreacting is like a comic book.
Yes,
he acts like a comic book character.
He does. His facial expressions are comic book-esque.
What is it that Kubota says?
What was that line?
He is cunning,
stupid, but at the same time
cunning.
Stupid, but at the same time cunning.
Yeah. And which is kind of in a way how the movie is, although I don't think it's stupid.
I wouldn't. No, I certainly wouldn't describe it as a stupid movie by any stretch of the imagination. But it does kind of like, maybe not that sophisticated, but sneakily awesome. It's very it kind of gets in there and it works somehow. But yeah,
it's amazing what you can do with limited resources with something like this. It's one of the best examples for what you can do.
Exactly, and
with limited resources.
Exactly, and Megalon comes out the next year and maybe isn't the best example of what you can do with it. And I love Godzilla versus Megalon. They were tired, and I love that movie so much. But again, I'm no fool.
On the podcast, I described it as a glorious train wreck.
It is a glorious. I like to call it the Mad Libs Godzilla film. I love that because I don't even remember when I thought of that, and I'd love to throw something like that in there. Megalon is its own entirely different challenge, and again, we talked about this before. The idea that on one level you should the thought would be, write Megalon because Megalon's easy and everyone's one-dimensional. You can't remember the characters just kind of move from one hillside back to the house to the other hillside into the truck and just watch things happen, and they don't really do anything. It's the opposite of easy because now I got to go in and fix it because I'm not gonna write. I will not write one-dimensional characters like that. I want to find a way to make it without getting too And again, I don't mean this in any kind of negative connotation at all, like fan fiction-y, where I'm basically inventing things like that. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm making fun of fan fictions because there are fan fiction writers much more talented than me out there, but I like to, again, how far do I go in making up my own stuff to make up for the fact that, screenwriter A or screenwriter B wrote these cardboard cutouts, and again, I like the characters in the movie. There's no Godzilla film on this planet that I don't like. I love them all. Genuinely love them all. I love Megalon. Again, I'm no fool. It's ridiculous, but I love it. You can't if you don't get any pleasure out of Megalon, I don't know how to help you. But that movie's just fun.
Yeah, you have no soul.
You have no soul. Yeah. Although I will admit, it's going to be hard to get through it and not put a Rexstart Eskimo Spy reference, which I'm seriously considering trying to find a way to do it.
You're talking about MST3K?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm a massive fan.
Another great line in there, a couple of great lines in there is you brought this up in the podcast. When they show that rather goofy looking establishing shot for Seatopia, and the joke was Houston.
Yeah,
I mean you could put something in there.
Houston.
It was as hot as Houston.
It was as hot as Houston.
Or blinding sunlight.
Today, Seatopia. Tomorrow, Broadway.
Another one of my favorite ones was. When Godzilla finally shows up and they're speaking for him, he's supposed to be trash talking, and he says stuff like, when the monsters are, he says, I came to chew sushi and kick butt.
I'm all out of sushi.
Yeah. And then another time they're taunting, the other monsters taunting Godzilla. Yeah. He says, something like, your mother was a lizard and your father was an A-bomb.
I love that part. Oh no, he's got a tree. That's not the Godzilla we know. And then Jet Jaguar looks up. A tree? That's just not like you. Have you lost it, man?
Yeah, you could have so much fun.
Say, Godzilla, your tail got longer. That's not my tail.
Yeah, it's just so much.
That's one of my favorite. I adore that show from top to bottom. I actually have full-size Tom Servo and Crow puppets in my collection of stuff. I built the Tom myself. It's going to be hard to get through that book and not have their voices in my head, but and I can watch it seriously and not hear the jokes, but it's hard to get the chase sequence and not have Rex Dart pops the clutch and tells the goons to eat his dust. It's gonna be hard.
I feel like the part where Jet Jaguar shows up on Monster Island and starts telling Godzilla to come to the mainland. There needs to be some remark in there about playing charades.
I'd love to, because out of all of them, and again, you got to take them seriously on one level, but you got to have fun. In Megalon, like Gigan, those are two perfect movies to get goofy.
Yeah.
To just let loose and just be like, and now they're doing this and that, and now did Ultraman just do the Shuat Ultraman? What is is happening here? That's Jet Jaguar. Actually, the first time I actually saw that film in really clear quality, I caught that. I hadn't caught it before. I hadn't caught it, and I freeze framed it on that shot, and I was like, wait, that's. Oh, come on, Toho. As if it wasn't obvious enough. And I took a picture of my TV and I texted a couple friends. I'm like, do you ever notice this? Did you ever notice he's doing the Ultraman pose? And I had a couple people text me back and they're like, oh my God. But Megalon is, and I've got the next chapter, because right now it's just a prologue. And I actually really liked that prologue. But chapter 1 I'm still sorting through because I'm basically having to provide characters for the two main characters, Goro and Jinkawa, because they didn't really have character in the movie. So I've got to go in and be like, okay, how do they know each other? Why is Goro 90 years older than his brother? Like, where's mom and dad? Did they die in 1954? Like, if so, why is their son 9? It's like, and you got to have fun with it, but it's just like, I got to go clean up after these.
Yeah, that's the ultimate question in Godzilla of how to explain what's going on.
How do you explain what's going on? And I love that stuff. Like, a lot of people will pick those films apart for plot holes here and plot holes there, and you can argue about what's a plot hole and what's not a plot hole and how to fix it and how what doesn't work, what does work. I love plot holes because I think so. I'm an overthinker when it comes to everything on this planet. I think a lot, and sometimes it holds me back, and you guys know what I mean. And sometimes I'm like, I should have done this. I should have done that. I think about thinking about things, and you know what I mean. So sometimes I'm my own worst enemy in that regard. But when it comes to like goofy plot holes and like lack of character development, like how does this person know this person? How are there 2 King Ghidorahs on the bottom of the ocean when it violates the script's time travel rules? I love thinking about stuff like that because in my mind there's an answer. But it's got to find it, even though it's like it's laziness, and like somebody didn't write that as well as they could have. I'd get, obviously I'm no fool, I get that, but I love watching it and thinking, well, it happened for a reason. I just got to figure it out, which is something I really, really love doing.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about some of the challenges of trying to do these adaptations. Mm-hmm. Which of these 30 plus movies do you think is going to be the most challenging to adapt? Is it Hedorah or is it another movie?
Well, Hedorah is going to be really, really difficult, but it's not Hedorah, and the only reason it's clear that it's not is because I actually started it, and I'm too scared to touch the one that is at the top of my list, and that is Shin Godzilla.
Yes.
Yeah. Shin Godzilla, and for no other, like many reasons, but number 1 on my list, and that's the reason that a lot of these they're going as slowly as they are, and some of them I haven't touched yet. Number 1 goal, always respect. Always respect. If I write it without understanding everything that I need to know, because the film is so politically, economically, culturally thick. It is, Shinji Higuchi himself said it. It's a film made by the Japanese for the Japanese. It is one of the most like densely, like intentionally Japanese of all of the films. It is so, and very heavily politically so. And I feel like I can't tackle it just because I feel like I don't know everything that I could about the politics of 2016 Japan, and I know a fair amount. I know about the more right wing stuff that's been going on in the government and how that exactly, and how it's really the antithesis to what GMK was trying to do, and about how it involves that one was more so about like remembering and not the hit past and not repeating it. And then there's all the different characters in that thing, and then there's all the different departments that they come from, and the different this and that and the other thing, and all the
ministries, and
the ministries and bureaucracy out the wazoo. And on a level, everybody that watches the film gets it. They get like what's going on, but they don't like. I certainly don't understand the history and all that stuff. And if I'm going to tackle the film, and I'm not just going to be like, and then Godzilla came, and Yaguchi was like, okay, then I will hurt him, and it will be fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like the film does, the film deserves a lot more than that. It deserves attention. It deserves to be analyzed, deeply, accurately, and then that needs to be the story. But I just feel like I don't know enough. And again, I owe you guys a lot in the research department, and I have not finished your Shin Godzilla episode yet, as I mentioned before.
It's 3 hours long.
3 hours long, and it's a
podcast.
Yes, but from what I have heard, just so good,
You've got
so
a 4-hour
phenomenal.
trip ahead of you.
I have a 4-hour trip. I'm gonna try to knock it out on the way home. Actually, absolutely, yeah. But I did resolve to myself that I wouldn't even consider taking notes on it till I finished your episode.
Thank you.
Yes, and I mean that truly. I mean that truly, because it is like just from the little bit that I heard. I don't remember how far I got, but I've read all kinds of stuff. I got the art book at home. I've got interviews. I've met Shinji Higuchi twice actually. He's awesome. He's wonderful, and I have an acquaintance on Twitter who he's from New York, and he went to Japan to work on the film, so he had a lot of set stories and things like that. He didn't work on the script or anything. He worked in I don't remember exactly what he did, but he's an awesome, just a wonderful gentleman, and a great pleasure to talk to about some of his experiences and hear what he had to say. And so I'm trying to gather as much as I can, but I just all of that stuff combined is not is really not going to get me there. But if I do my research and I use your guys' incredibly hard work, which you get, I will credit you guys obviously for that. Like, I'm not gonna be, yes, I did all of this myself. Like, no, I'm not a jerk, but no, I owe you guys a lot, and I will owe you more once I actually start writing the darn thing, because you guys have assembled, and again, from the little bit I heard, you guys have assembled probably the definitive analysis of the damn thing in America right now, which is just a blessing to have for a number of reasons. A fan perspective and a historical perspective, and for a research perspective. But yes, the number one movie that is actually legitimately giving me anxiety is, because technically, I have committed to eventually getting to it, is Shin Godzilla, but that's gonna be down the line.
Yeah, you talk about headspace. Oh my goodness.
Oh my god,
that's a lot of headspace.
It's a lot of headspace.
Trying to put yourself into someone else's shoes, and then on top of that, trying to think of how they think about patriotism is a challenge. Because, like, Americans, there are so many Americans who are patriotic for such a wide spectrum of reasons and what they think is important, more important than this or that or the other, and their priorities, and everybody thinks of it differently.
Yeah, and then translate that to another country and another culture.
Yeah.
All the different perspectives.
You have to have all this historical background as much as you can, and then you think of where the divides are across about how Japanese people think of patriotism.
Exactly.
It's just so wildly different from country to country and person to person.
It's a lot to try to tackle, and hearing myself talk about it, there's that little voice is coming back in the back of my head and saying, "Dude, are you nuts?" But that little voice has got to go away, or else I'm going to psych myself out, and I'm not going to be able to do it.
I was going to say, tell him to shut up.
Oh, I'm telling. I tell him all the time. He's sick of it.
Yeah. So I have to know, speaking as a writer myself.
Yes.
How have you grown as a writer through all of this?
Good question. Well, it's really, and I've done some nonfiction-y, like some I did the Shin Godzilla write-up for G-Fan. I've done some reviews. I've done things like that. But in terms of actually approaching the fiction, this has been remarkable. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of growth. And I've done some things on my own, nothing that I've published, of course. And I've started writing some short stories along the lines of the book that you published, Nate. Very, very similar. I started a couple years ago, and I'm kind of outlining some stories, and something that I could actually sell and make money off of. Because again, obviously, the Godzilla Novelization Project is something that I can't and wouldn't have any intention of making money off of. I obviously don't own the character yet, but. Oh, we can dream. But those things, that's another big thing I get asked a lot is how is Toho not filled your mailbox with C&Ds? And it's I'm basically operating on the fan fiction principle where I'm not asking money for it. It's online for free. I'm not going to charge money. I do have a Patreon account, but that's for monetary support for acquiring research material and just making the books better, and even for taking time off of work to write more. And I'm very, very grateful to my Patreon. I have currently three just wonderful, wonderful Patreon backers. I love them to death. And but aside, and that's not I'm not charging them for the books, and I'm not printing them. And God, I wish I could print them. I wish I could print them, even if I could just like throw them out for free. But I got to be as careful as possible because I have nothing but respect for Toho and their characters and the work that they've done over, decades and decades and decades in this movie. So I'm not gonna mess with it as best I can. But back to the writing and just the progression of it. It's been very interesting comparing it to the stories that I'm doing myself, that I'm coming up with on my own, because that's an entirely different ball game in one level, because you're basically creating the characters and you're building them up and you're bringing them through the story, and then you're finishing their story. You're building them up, or you're destroying them, or you're carrying them on. You're leaving something open. You're giving them motivation. You're giving them this and that, and that's all coming from me. The Godzilla Novelization Project is different because somebody already did all the hard work for me. Somebody already wrote these characters. Somebody already filmed the scenes. Somebody already did all this incredibly hard work, sometimes as 6.5 decades ago. And so it's been more about accurate and enjoyable interpretation and trying to get something that somebody else did and adapt it. It's about adaptation. So it's been an interesting experience as a writer, moving from invention, like actually coming up with the story myself, to adaptation of something that somebody already did. So I've already got the plot lined out for me. I've already got the character progression lined out for me. I've already got the dialogue. So it's been, I don't want to necessarily say easier, but different on certain levels, and then harder on others, because there's a whole set of challenges that come from adapting something like this that you don't necessarily get when you're trying to write your own original story, because you have to adhere to somebody else's vision a little bit. And, you can say like, oh yeah, I got to do it, or it's going to tee off the fans and they're going to come after me. But I'm much harder on myself than any fan could be. And I, like I've said many times thus far, like it's all about the respect. And I write everything I write hoping that it's respectful to the people who actually put all that work into creating what I'm using for the adaptation. And also the other thing that I've really, really loved is the different genres, which we talked about before, because I'd written a couple of kind of sci-fi things. I have a little fantasy novel I'm writing right now. I have a short story that's not science fiction at all. It's more of like a psychological thing, which I've been really, really having fun with. And it's hopefully I'll get that done one of these days. But as we mentioned before, the Godzilla series is so varied. So it's given me the opportunity to try writing horror. It's given me the opportunity to try writing like the kind of a fantasy. It's given me the opportunity to write more action, or more this, more that, more the other thing. All these different genres that I hadn't tried before, which is again one of the reasons that the site is so varied right now with different content, is because I wanted to say, can I do this? And if I can, how am I going to progress? Because let's say I tackle, the fantasy aspect of Godzilla's Revenge, All Monsters Attack. How can I then take that and then bring it back to like Mothra, which is very fantasy heavy, and maybe use the experience of something that's a little lighter in the fantasy, like All Monsters Attack, and then go back and tackle Mothra with a little bit more knowledge on how to do fantasy really, really well and how to write in that world. And then you've got the deeply allegorical historical stuff. And then you've got, all these different things. So it's given me a really, really amazing opportunity. And again, it's really, really beautiful in a way, because watching the Godzilla films exposes you to all these different genres and how to view them and how to watch them and how to, see them. And then it's doing the same thing in print form, where as a writer, I'm getting the opportunity to tackle all these different genres, different perspectives. I have, some books where I'm really getting into characters' heads. And then in others, I'm stepping back a little bit. And I've even toyed with maybe writing one or two of them in first person. But I'm not sure which ones those would be. They'd have to be very, very character specific. I almost started doing All Monsters Attack in first person. Yeah. But then you lose things like the bank robbers talking alone and his dad talking alone and how much money is that? Oh, it can fit in a bag this big. Like, Ichiro wasn't there for that. And I love those little scenes. Ichiro's in most of the film, but they're pivotal moments where he's not there. And like they're always
with his mom.
Yes.
Where he leaves, and then you have to write about what's going through her head.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to do that. And like what Anami might be thinking about this the situation where he has to deal with this little boy who obviously he cares about, but it's just such a sad situation where you've got mom off here and dad off there, and this little boy is letting himself out and feeding himself and going to, the poor kid, his only enjoyment is playing in an abandoned, dangerous factory with machine parts and broken radios. I mean, what do other people think about that looking at him? You know what I mean? So I would lose that perspective saying, hi, my name's Ichiro and I dream about monsters a lot, which would be a really cool perspective to tackle. And I do love first person though, which is one of the things I'm most proud of that's on the site right now is the Steve Martin Report, which is a short story that I wrote entirely first person from Raymond Burr's character. I'm really, really pleased with that. And it was an excuse to do something a little shorter. And I could actually say, yes, there's something on the website I finished because everything else is so long. And it was also a great excuse to just kind of approach the film from a first person perspective in homage to the film, which is, narrated by him. I had a lovely opportunity with that one to experiment writing in first person, which I haven't done in any of the other books. But not only that, I put myself into the mindset of a 1950s era, reporter and their verbiage and how they would describe something and how their sentence structure might be written and, how it might differ and the different kind of words they'd use and the different way that they'd describe being in another country. And like, how did Raymond Burr feel about being in Japan, a few years after we bombed them, you know what I mean? And seeing this crazy thing happen, did the allegory occur to his character? Like, did the significance occur, even though it's watered down in the English cut considerably? Like, maybe he got it because he took that role so seriously. So I had the really, really wonderful opportunity to take this Al C. Ward's script from Godzilla King of the Monsters and his narration dialogue that he wrote for Raymond Burr and weave that into original things that I wrote. I basically filled in the gaps and I changed it all into past tense. And I basically presented it as kind of an in-universe artifact. Like, he gets back from his experience and he sits down and he writes this thing and he ships it off to George Lawrence, United World News, Chicago, USA. And, I have a little introduction where he basically says, reporters wait their entire life, sometimes wait their entire life for the story that will give them immortality and make them famous. And some part of me wishes I were as lucky as they were now. So here's my story. Do with it what you will. Signed, Steve Martin. And then from there, it's in 2 parts on the website. And I had it was a joy to write that. It was a joy to write that. I love his character from that film. And my guiding light in that was if I couldn't hear Raymond Burr's voice in my head saying the line, I erased it. Which was really, I was like, nope, he wouldn't. It doesn't sound like something he'd say. It doesn't sound like, I can't hear his voice in my head say that. So I'd get rid of it. So that was a really, really cool angle. And I've taken what I've learned from writing that and I'm starting to apply it to some of the other things I'm doing, Godzilla Novelization Project wise and otherwise, tackling that first person perspective, past tense, and the era, writing from that era. So I certainly didn't come into writing this project any kind of professional writer. I don't even really still consider myself a professional writer that much, but to say that I've learned a lot and grown even in the last just couple of months, I think is in very, very accurate. I've learned a lot, and I cannot wait to learn more. Really, I love learning more about this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that you don't consider yourself a professional writer. I was wondering if is that an aspiration that you have to eventually do?
Yes, it is. It definitely is. And right now it's something I'm doing when I'm not stuck at work until 3 a.m, which is something I have to do to keep a roof over my head right now. But I'm writing when I can. I'm writing this project, and I can't make money off of it, but I'm writing it for a number of reasons. I love the films. I love all this stuff. I'm doing it. A big chunk of it is writing experience because it's something I can go back in. It's something I can share with people and I can get feedback on, and it's a character people recognize, and they can come in and say, I don't know about that. And I'll be like, okay, I'll see what I can do. Yeah. Or they can say, that was really, really good. And I'll be like, thank you. That's nice. But there's lovely, I'm getting some lovely feedback from people. You two have given me some great feedback. I've had family members that give me feedback. And again, I mentioned my brother earlier, and the man who cannot sugarcoat his opinions in any way. And if something's not reading right, he'll call me out on it. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful for that because as a writer, you got to have people that'll listen to you. And you've got to have people that will look you in the eye and say, I don't know about that one thing. Or they'll just look you in the eye and say, nah, it sucks, bro. Yeah. You can't put that out there. That was the thing that really irked me a lot in college was I didn't get a lot of constructive criticism on my work, which was very, very my professors would say it's bad, but they never told me how to fix it.
Yeah, well, negative criticism.
They were negative criticism. Yeah. It was not constructive, not positive at all, and it was not helpful because they didn't say why it sucked. They just said that it sucked. And so I was like, well, what can I would have to like drag it out of them. Like, what can I do? So I'm really thankful for the people and people on social media and I'm not a big social media person. I had to like force myself to like get on Facebook and Twitter. And I actually didn't have my own personal Facebook at all before this project. Like, wow. I did not have one.
You were a latecomer.
I am a latecomer. I'm a super duper latecomer. I just haven't really had a use for it, but I have one now only so that I can update this project. And right now I've got like the Facebook. I have a nice little following on Facebook, but Twitter I've got like 360 people following me.
Oh wow!
Which is just incredible. And it's only the last couple of months it's just taken off. And I've been engaging with people, and people have been giving me ideas. And I've noticed people getting really really excited. That extra energy that they give me helps me, and you know what I mean, you're a writer. Like, it makes you want to do better, and that helps me grow as a writer. That helps me grow as a writer a lot. Like, I consider this a big part of the growth process, the creative growth process for me. And it's just gonna, I dearly hope it will just make better books as they go along, and then I can go back and be like, that one part of that one thing I wrote a few years ago isn't quite up to snuff, and then I can fix it. You know what I mean? It's I can get on the website and edit it anytime. I don't really want to have to, though. I want to put out the best thing I can. But, you know, I'm human. Things slip through, and I'll go back in and be like, why are there 9 apostrophes? Like, did I fall asleep on the keyboard? Like, the other day I did. I found like 3 apostrophes in the word, in his, H-I-S apostrophe S. And there were like 2 apostrophes and then an extra one after the S. And I was like, how did I not see this? And I'm like, I'm at G-Fest right now. I'm handing people business cards. I got to fix it. It's like 2 a.m. I got to fix this. So I fixed it. But I had a lot of fun, like, feeling myself grow as a writer. It's been really, really cool. It's been really, really fun.
Your statement about gaining writing experience, I'm reminded of Sean Connery in the movie Finding Forrester. Writer's Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, indeed. Oh, good old Sean.
You're the man now, dog.
Oh, good old Sean.
Yeah. So we just got a few more questions left. There are going to be some fun ones.
All right, bring it on.
This is something that we ask a lot of people when we do. You're only our second interview, but when we meet G fans, we often ask them, "What is your actual favorite Godzilla film?"
Ooh, that's the question. I'm one of those people, and you guys mentioned it on your podcast where my favorite tends to be the one that I'm in the mood for the most. You know, like if I'm in a dark mood, like pop in Godzilla. If I'm in this mood or that mood, but
that's how I function a lot too.
Yeah, it's like that's how I usually do. I'm one of those people that's like, well, it's not necessarily bad. I just wasn't in the mood for it. But everybody has their favorites, right? So I actually bounce back and forth between 2 depending on the day you ask me. And just as with most people, it's the first ones that they saw. And I was introduced to Godzilla when I was very, very young. I'm like 5 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I actually went, and I've been wanting to see one forever. And I went over to a friend's house, and I love this story because it's like, but I went over to a friend's house, and he was like, dude, we're going to watch a Godzilla movie. And I was like, yes, we are. And he had and this was like 2001 or 2000 or something. And he had a giant projector in his basement and a big screen. And the movie was Godzilla 2000, which at that point was very, very recent, of course. And it was the first time I'd seen, and of course I'd lived through the 98 promotional stuff. I didn't have any of the toys or anything like that, but I saw the incredible marketing blitz that happened for that. And I was like, who's this Godzilla guy? And I have very fuzzy memories. It's possible that parts of that film, the 98 film, might have been the first I saw, but I don't think so, because I remember seeing posters and I remember seeing the tape that we had at our house, but we hadn't watched it. And I was like, who is this Godzilla guy? I got to know. And something about it was just fascinating. And he puts in Godzilla 2000. And of course, that great opening attack on Nomuro is really just, to me, it's a highlight of the series. I just love it. It's like, to me, that moment with him silhouetted with the fire is quintessential Godzilla in my brain. My jaw hit the floor and dropped right to the center of the world. I would just like plunged through the crust. I was in awe, and I still, that scene still makes me feel the same way I did when I was a child when I watch it. So, but the sad thing is I got about 2/3 of the way through the movie and then I had to leave.
Oh.
Right when the rock started crumbling off the UFO and Shinoda, the UFO flew away again. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And that shot of the helicopter, but that's when we had to turn it off. And I was like, but no, yes, crap. So I left and but my brain, that was it. I was hooked, and my brain was just on fire. And I went to my mom and I was like, "It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And she goes, "There's like a lot of these, right?" And I was like, "Do tell." And creepy Willy Wonka meme. And she says, let's go to the library. And so we jumped in the car, and at that time, my local library was it was books and VHS tapes. They had like 3 DVDs in a corner that nobody touched because nobody cared. And it was like 2 James Bond movies and maybe like a Planet of the Apes film. You know what I mean? And I didn't even have a DVD player at the time, so I couldn't have watched them if I wanted to. But they're lined up in the after the little G card in the alphabetical order were about 4 or 5 tapes, and they were the Scimitar tapes.
Oh, the Scimitar tapes.
Man. Yes, of whatever films they released. And she said,
I could tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, because I used to have them.
Oh yeah, I still do. And she said, pick one out. My mom's the best. She came with me this year as well. She's been a lot of moral support for me. So this is all her fault. She said, pick one out, and I was like, okay, mother dearest. So I flipped through, and of course it was Mothra versus Godzilla.
Oh, wonderful.
And I to this day, like, my memories are pretty darn clear of that day. And I remember it was the box art that sold me. And of course it was Godzilla versus the Thing, but the video title from Scimitar was Godzilla versus Mothra. Yeah. And I picked it up and I looked at this crazy art of this bug. I was like, what is happening? And I flipped it over, and then there are the pictures of the fairies and the egg and Mothra's head and Godzilla, that great Godzilla suit from 1964. And I looked at Mom and I said, this is the one. And my brother was there with me. He's 2.5 years younger than I am, and and of course he was very, very young at the time. Me too. So he picked one out, and he's like, "This one's got 3-headed dragon on it." So we brought home Monster Zero and Mothra versus Godzilla as our first 2. So Mothra versus Godzilla became the first one I saw all the way through, and it wasn't until years and years later that I discovered that it's like people consider it the definitive sequel, the Goldfinger, as it were.
The Goldfinger.
The one where
same year even.
The same year. It's the one where everything clicked. The music was great. The performances, Sekizawa, Honda, Ifukube, all Nakajima, all at the top of their game. Super Eyes effects are great. It's so good. And so I was very, very lucky to have that be the one that I saw the first way through. So depending on which day you ask me, it's either Godzilla 2000 or Mothra versus Godzilla. But Mothra versus Godzilla I'll go with that one because it just holds such a deep place in my heart for that film. And Mothra to this day, I'm not afraid to admit, is my favorite kaiju. It's like, I love her to
wear that badge proudly.
I do.
I am surprised at the amount of more recently the amount of hate Mothra seems
it's
to get.
Very disheartening. I
was like, I thought everyone loved Mothra.
Me too. Yeah. So that's been one of the wonderful gateways that I've used to actually introduce my girlfriend to some of these films as well, because when she grew up, she had someone in her life who showed her that exact film. And when she found out I liked Godzilla, that's the one she brought up. She's like, Mothra versus Godzilla. I watched that when I was a kid, and I was like, you did not. Guess what we're doing? We're going to have a marathon. So, which we still haven't gotten through. We did commit to watching them all together, and there's many she has not seen, but we have... We actually haven't even watched that one yet, but we need to get on it. We need to get on it so she can relive that part of her childhood. But she calls Mothra my baby.
It's amazing how much staying power Mothra has.
Oh yes,
like you cannot unsee it. It's going to be in your brain forever.
Instantly iconic.
Yeah,
instantly iconic, and it's something that's so Japanese too. Like who in America would have assigned that much? Like depth to a giant bug. I mean, we 50s have a lot of giant bugs, and none of them have
stuff of pure fantasy.
Yeah, Mothra's a beautiful Japanese fantasy character that could only have come out of that country, and and again, we've brought up Sekizawa I don't know how many times, but it bears repeating that film is one of his best, the best of the genre, but it's one of some of his best work as well. Absolutely, I love Mothra.
Yeah, so along those lines, who's your favorite screenwriter? I know that might be a little bit difficult to.
Yeah, there are many,
depends.
And there are many, and they're also varied. Is my favorite thing about them and again, there's a Godzilla for all seasons, right? So there's a screenwriter for all these different things, and I've mentioned him 8,000 times on the podcast, but just for the fact that I really, really respect him a lot on numerous levels is Sekizawa, and I love them all. I mean, all the other wonderful, wonderful people that have written these stories and written these scripts. And again, there's not a single one I don't like. I love them all to death. I truly do. But Sekizawa, historically is significant, and just in terms of the amount of talent he brought to the table. And I mention this all the time. You will, and no one needs convincing of this if they've ever seen one of his films, is that you'll never watch a Sekizawa movie with a Sekizawa screenplay where you don't love the characters. Yeah. The characters are all amazing. They're so well defined. And when you pair them with great actors, Akira Takarada, Yuriko Hoshi, like I'm thinking Mothra vs. Godzilla right now, Hiroshi Koizumi and Kenji Sahara and Yoshifumi Chajima, the great entrepreneur. Mr. Kumiyama himself, and of course the Peanuts, the fairies. You gotta love them, the Shobijin. And
it's amazing how you feel like you know them.
You feel like, yeah, it's like...
And it's like a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. In Mothra vs. Godzilla is amazing, and to this day, like I mentioned before, I watch these films, I put them in, I'm instantly where I was when I first saw them. When Sakai gets out of the car to look at the typhoon, and then Junko gets out, and you see their faces, you immediately feel like they're your best friends. You know what I mean? Like in the weirdest way. Even though you don't know what kind of characters they're going to be quite yet, you can get a feeling. But you already, it's like a hug. Those movies are just like a hug to me. Like Sekizawa, it feels like if I've ever had the fortune to meet him. Of course, he was long gone, long before there was any way I could meet him. Yeah. I would have given him the biggest bear hug, and I would like to think he would have returned it, because I love like him as a person is a fascinating character too, and the fact that he was described as being. And I cannot remember who said. I want to say Ishiro Honda said this, that Sekizawa was intimately childlike, but in the best way possible. And that's something and again, I'm no Shinichi Sekizawa on any level, but I'm a giant child. And I think anybody who loves these films...
Me too.
Can proudly, scream from the rooftop, yes, my inner child is alive and well. And that's another thing that fuels my writing as well, is just this feeling that... whatever Tsuburaya and Sekizawa and Honda were doing to instill that sense of wonder in the viewer works on me. And it worked on me as a child, and it works on me now. And that is just really, really special to me. And especially to meet other people whom have been impacted in that same way, and they can honestly say, yes, my inner child is there, my sense of wonder is intact. And and again, anybody who sits down to watch one of these things and can't get into that feeling place of
warmth. You feel this warmth.
It is warm. It is inviting. It's comforting, and not just because of nostalgia either. No. Because nostalgia obviously plays a huge part in this. But even if I'd never, because I found a lot of those films, and I'll use Sekizawa as an example, much later on. Because growing up, I watched Mothra vs. Godzilla on repeat until the library sold the tape and I couldn't find it, which stunk. And I watched the same thing with Monster Zero, which was my third Godzilla film. Second one I saw all the way through. And then after that, I kind of piecemealed them together and found the other ones. And I discovered the Heisei films after that. And I watched King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Mechagodzilla 2 practically on a loop in middle from elementary school up through middle school. And I still love them to death. That feeling that they give you, even without the nostalgia. Because again, I found... films like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and Sea Monster much later in my Godzilla loving and collecting career. I think I first watched Sea Monster in 2007, which is relatively recent, actually. It was only like 10, 11 years ago. I didn't grow up with that one. I grew up with clips of it because clips of it popped up everywhere and some public domain things everywhere like that. When I was a kid... the Toledo Mud Hens, our local minor league baseball team. The Mud Hens. The less you know, the happier you will be.
And the hockey team is the Walleyes?
The Walleyes, yeah. I went to one of those, and I have not gone back. But I did used to go to the Mud Hens. I'm not a huge sports person, but... yeah, it was fun to go baseball with my dad every once in a while. And they had a thing they would do where they would play We Will Rock You, but they would set it to footage on the big screen, and it was King Kong pounding on Skull Island, boom, boom, and then Godzilla clapping. And they would just repeat that on loop, boom, boom, clap. And that footage was from Godzilla versus the Sea Monster when he takes down the last jet and he does this. Yeah. And so I for the longest time as a child, like a little child, I was like, what movie is that from? And then when I watched Sea Monster, I was like, Now I get it.
And, I know, and your brain feels good when those gaps are filled in like that.
Gaps were filled in.
You're like, oh yeah, that's from that.
Yeah.
Finally,
it's so satisfying. For the longest time, I couldn't even tell that was Kong pounding on the door because it was fuzzy and gross, and it didn't even look like stop motion. It kind of looked like Minya from the back, actually. I was like, was this from that one weird movie with Godzilla's son? And I watched it, and I was like, where's the scene of him pounding on the door? That's from King Kong. I mean, and of course, that was when I was a kid. That was so long ago. But yeah, like Sea Monster, I didn't see it all the way through till I was maybe, I probably would have been like maybe 14 or 15. And even though I hadn't seen it before, it felt like a warm hug. There was no nostalgia playing a part in my enjoyment of that film because I hadn't seen it before. Sekizawa, it was warm, just like you said. And so it's not always nostalgia, which I love, and nostalgia is huge for me. But at the same time, I love the way he wrote. I loved him as a person, and the way that his experiences really, really affected his writing, and the fact that the stories that he wrote, the characters he created, have become so much a part of me. Really, I carry that with me all the time. I love those characters. I love everything about them. I love the stories. So it's Sekizawa is my man. Get your Sekizawa on.
Hashtag
get your Sekizawa. Every tweet I make from here on out. Hashtag get your Sekizawa on. People who don't know what I'm talking about are going to be very confused and think I'm nuts. But I don't care.
I think they already do.
They probably already do.
It's a little late for that.
I probably already do. I got a lot of, when I first launched the Facebook page, I had a lot of people, because I used to tell people like, I don't need a Facebook. And then of course when people found me, they were like, dude, you got a Facebook? And I'm like, yeah, I did. Here's an invite to like the Godzilla Novelization Project. Yeah. and a couple of them did like it back, and a couple of them I haven't heard from since. They were like, I knew he was weird, but what is happening
so
here?
What you're saying is Godzilla has helped you figure out who your real friends are.
This is so true. This is
you should put if you want to be my friend, if you are not comfortable at G-Fest, we can't be friends.
Yeah, this is why I go with my family every year for the most part, because they're comfortable because they've had to live with me their whole lives, and it's just like, yeah, he's nuts, but we love him anyway.
Yeah, my sister feels the same way. I have occasionally tried to get her to come with me to a Comic-Con or something, and I said, because there was an actress I knew she would really like. I said, "Are you sure you really want to come with me?" He's like, "I've lived with you all my life. I can handle this."
I think that sounds like something my brother would have said. But he's come to G-Fest almost every year with us, and he gets a huge kick out of it because he did grow up with these movies too to some extent, and at a certain point, like so many people sadly do, he veered off and into other things, and it just kind of always, pardon me, it just kind of always stayed with me. And it will be with me forever. And he certainly respects it, but it's just not his thing. Everybody's got their thing. But I still love the fact that he's been such an integral part in me doing this project. I love that.
Yeah, a lot of people know me as like a film buff, and I'm into Hitchcock and so many classic films, and then I tell them I'm going to do a podcast about Godzilla. And they're like,
yes.
Wait. They're like, wait, what?
What are you talking
and I'm
about?
Like, no, trust me, really. I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
I know what I'm doing.
Yes. I've gotten that a lot because and again, back to my horrible experience in art school, I used to get very passive aggressive, and I would in the best way possible, and I would sneak little references to movies I loved into my artwork. And one year I actually got away with and remind me if I have a picture of it, I'll have to show you guys sometime. I did a palette knife oil painting of Hedorah coming out of the water, but I said it's a sea monster, and it's just a monster. It's a fish. It's a fish coming out of the water, and I actually got really interested. I got some good feedback on it for once, but I'd never told anybody what it actually was, and except a couple of people, and every once in a while I'd put something very, very overt in. Like one of my very first projects, I was asked to paint a picture that represented me, like a collage of things that were very much like me. Oh. And I put, a couple of words in there. I put like some images here and there. I put MST silhouettes at the bottom of the painting, of course. And then I put, and in the background was kind of a multicolored Godzilla silhouette, the Godzilla 2000 silhouette from the poster. Oh. And I put that up there, and it was a little embarrassing. People were laughing at me. Like, oh, come on, you guys. Come on. How old are we here? But there's like, wait, why is Godzilla up there? You have no idea, do you? Well, strap in. Well, strap in. So it's been interesting. I think a lot of Godzilla fans go through that, where they've got people that are like, oh, that's weird. Why do you like that stuff? And at a certain point, you can only explain it to them so much before you realize, some of them, you realize it's like, he's just not going to get it.
You just sort of give up.
You just got to give up. I'm going to go try to preach to somebody else now because you're a lost cause. You go over there. Bye. We're not friends anymore.
And
of course not.
Loving foreign films. I really love foreign films.
Foreign films are awesome.
And this is almost sort of just one of the ultimate sort of foreign film experiences. Just
it really is.
How wide of a variance there is. How unreal so many of them are.
Yes.
And just how different Godzilla movies are from so much of everything.
There's a hugely engrossing magnetic appeal just in the foreignness of them from our perspective, because there's nothing really like them. You could say, okay, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and then you've got your Harryhausens, and you've got your Roger Cormans, and you've got your this and your that, and you've even got some of the more higher profile things, like what Harryhausen was doing in the 50s and 60s and onwards into the 80s.
Yeah, that man was a household name.
He was a household name. He's one of my other incredible heroes to me.
My mom introduced me to Harryhausen. I couldn't. Changed my life.
Yeah. I saw Clash of the Titans when I was probably too young to watch Clash of the Titans. But
probably me too.
Horrifically scary Medusa and some occasional breastfeeding moments. But I treasure that film. I treasure Harryhausen and his work. His work has really been influential to me. One of my projects actually in college was I did a 1/1 scale bust of his Medusa. Ooh. And again, I never told anybody that it was from anything. I was just like, it's a Greek monster. But I had one friend who knew what it was, and she walked up to me and she said, "This is amazing. When you finish it, I will hand you $300." And I went, okay. So she has it now. She has this thing. I was really, really proud of it. But Harryhausen's another huge influence on me. Yeah. And because he also wrote his own stories too. He didn't actually write the scripts, but like the outlines, the plots of a lot of those films came from him. And he did the storyboarding, and then obviously he did the animation. Yeah. So the man was a through and through storyteller, and it was brilliant. And I wish I'd gotten to meet him before he passed away. Yeah, he was like a grandfather figure almost, even though I never got to meet him. I treasure those films.
Yeah, the story you told about sneaking Godzilla and these other things in with our class actually reminded me there was I don't know if you're familiar with a sitcom from the 90s called Family Matters.
Family Matters.
Yeah, I remember an episode very distinctly. I think it was one of the daughters in the family. She was taking an art class, and her art teacher asked her something about a sculpture that was done by I think he actually said Rodin, and she made a reference like, no, this is not a giant pterodactyl or something.
I remember that reference.
And I remember seeing it like, I get that.
I got it. I got that reference.
I don't know how many other people did, but I got it.
Isn't it like just wonderful when you're watching something mainstream and they'll throw in a Godzilla reference?
Simpsons loves
doing that. Simpsons loves doing that. I've caught a couple of. Have you guys ever seen the Bob's Burgers episode where it's basically Lone Wolf and Cub?
No.
It's so good. Have you guys seen the Lone Wolf and Cub movies?
Unfortunately,
I recommend the Criterion has a Barnes & Noble sale going on right now. 50% off. Go get if you like samurai and crazy, go watch Lone Wolf and Cub. They're from the 70s from Toho. A couple familiar faces pop up in there if I recall correctly, but there's 6 of them, and they're based on a very, very popular manga, and it's about the former.
I've heard of the manga.
Yeah, the former executioner to the shogunate, and he's framed for a crime he didn't commit. He supposedly defaces a shrine, I believe, and his wife is killed, and he's forced to go on the run, kind of fugitive style, to clear his name away from the shogunate. But it's him and his infant son Daigoro, and he adopts the assassin for hire moniker of Lone Wolf and Cub. And he travels the country, trying to take out the bad guy who framed him and clear his name. But also, he's an assassin for hire, so people hire him to do stuff. And it's a wonderful 6 movies. And they're completely over the top and insane. Like the baby cart that the infant is in is armed to the teeth with guns and like blades he can pull out. And those films are really, really good. And there's an episode of Bob's Burgers called a Hawk and Chick, where it's awesome because Bob and Louise they watch Japanese movies together, and it's like a bonding thing for them. And I was like, me and my daughter one day, I hope, and that'd be great. And but basically, Hawk in this episode, they find the guy who played Hawk. 4 decades on, he's like he's an old man now, and he comes to America to find his daughter, who in the movie played Chick. His actual real life daughter played his daughter in the movies, and they help them reconcile with a film festival of their old movies, which is basically, it's kind of similar. It's the little girl and then the samurai, and they fight giant monsters, and there's like a giant seaweed monster and a jellyfish monster, and so they're definitely throwing in a lot of kaiju references. But it's a great it's so in depth, and they even named the actor who played Hawk like after the two creators. I think they used one guy's first name and one guy's last. I don't remember exactly, but they used that. So that's a great little reference for that. But I highly, if you like over the top, insane Japanese samurai and great films, watch the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. They're so good. But I love hearing references to that stuff pop up in like The Simpsons, like you said, or someone will be wearing a T-shirt, or someone will be like, "Oh, Godzilla something." Like it's cool. I always love that.
It's in the pop culture. So where can people read your work? Okay,
you guys, if anybody out there is interested in checking out the Godzilla Novelization Project, this isn't so hard. www.godzillanovelization.wordpress.com. I'm a cheapskate. I have a free WordPress account. So it's .wordpress.com. If you type in Google like Godzilla Novelization Project, it should just show up. On the website, it'll bring you right to an update page, and you can see all the stuff that I'm working on. If you scroll up and down, there's a tab for the novels. There's an FAQ on the website that answers if you have any questions. That would be a great place to go.
Nice.
Where I talk a little bit about some of the questions you guys asked as well. Some of those questions are there, and after you guys have asked me some of these, I'm going to add a few of those. I might add a few of those questions to them because you guys asked me some really great questions. There's links to the timeline, which is another project I've started on the website where I'm basically committed to gradually creating a series of Godzilla timelines that catalog the events of the series as I write the books. So it's like a little side project. So there's a timeline page, and I have part of this, what I'm calling the Sony timeline, done right now, which is the 98 universe and the animated series. And I have the prequel information from the anime movies, which is in the books. I have that all categorized and written out. And that's just a little side thing I do when I have some free time. So, but the main, the heart and the soul of the website is definitely the novels. And www.godzillannovelizationproject.wordpress.com. And you can also, I swear I don't bite. Leave me comments, talk to me. I absolutely love talking kaiju and Godzilla with people. It's super duper awesome. I can be, you can, follow me, follow on Facebook and Twitter, all that good stuff. I see everything people send me. I always read. And make suggestions about novels. Like if you have an idea. Like if any readers have ideas, I love to hear those things. If I'm ruining your childhood, let me know. Definitely all those things. And shameless Patreon plug. I do have a Patreon account. I'm always uncomfortable like asking for monetary support for things like that. But if you go to the Godzilla Novelization Project website, or GNP website for short, and you click the support tab, you will find a link to Patreon, and you can go on. And I don't have a lot of stuff that I can offer right now, but the more backers I get, the more products I could potentially manufacture, the more rewards I could give. I have 3 wonderful backers right now, and money donated to it allows me to gather research equipment and write the novels faster and all that good stuff. So that's definitely an option. No pressure, but it's definitely an option. But yeah, like if anybody out there listening right now reads it and likes what they've read, or, if you don't like what you've read, let me know and I'll try to fix it. But if you do like what you've read, the only thing I can ask is share it. Share it with other fans, other friends and family that you think might get a kick out of it. Spread the word, and, the more days I can brighten, the more entertainment I can give by letting people know, like reminding them of how much Godzilla means to them, then that's all I can ask, just enjoy it and spread the word. And if I suck, tell me. And if if you enjoy it, then, just keep reading and keep sharing it. And it's all I can ask, and I really appreciate it.
I find it really amazing how the fan base is so great with Godzilla and with the kaiju genre, and how so many people produce so much content and they know that they might not make much back, if anything at all.
Oh, yeah.
It's because of their devotion to the subject.
Yes.
And that's all that's driving them.
Exactly. Like
it's
the same.
The passion the passion in this community is just incredible.
It really is. This
the
is one
energy
of the most,
that
the
people
passion,
have.
very, very passionate. There's only a couple of fan bases I've ever encountered that have been this passionate.
Right.
And it's just a joy to be a part of it in a way, and to feel like I'm doing something unique. You know, there's a lot of wonderful writers out there that do original fiction that gets published or, self-published or otherwise, and things that show up in magazines and things that show up on other people's personal websites and things like that. But no one's tried to, no one's been insane enough. Obviously, I must be to say, yeah, I'm going to try doing one Godzilla novelization, let alone, God, like 3 dozen of more. Because by the time I get one of them done, there's going to be like 9 more. So like the uniqueness of it, I think, is really, really cool. And the passion, it's the passion of the fans that's going to help this thing grow. It really, really is, because if I can get people to check it out, and if they like what they read, they'll share it. You know what I mean? Like, at least I hope they will, and spread the word and say, hey, this guy he's not completely terrible, but and it's hopefully, and obviously, as you guys can tell, I'm very passionate about this stuff, and I dearly hope that passion not only comes through me blabbering about it all the time, but just me through the writing. I really hope that reading it lets you know that I'm serious about it, and that I have fun with it, and I take it seriously at the same time, and that it's something that I'm devoted to, and something that I am passionate about, and something that I am committed to working on and making as good as I possibly can.
Yeah, and it's that uniqueness, that enthusiasm, that passion was why I wanted you to come on to the show.
Thank you very much.
And also because
lovely to hear.
You're someone who looks at these films the same way that we do.
Yes, and that's one of the things
it's great to have like-minded people.
It is. That's one of the things that led me to. There are many, many wonderful Godzilla and Kaiju podcasts out there, but this one really spoke to me because you guys watch the films and appreciate the films the same way I do. That's like you just said. So it's I'm glad that I got to come on here, and that you guys, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on and do my elevator pitch basically, and just like talk a little bit about it.
And did we get stuck in the elevator?
Yeah,
We've been talking a while.
Exactly.
But it's been wonderful. Absolutely, every second wonderful.
Thank you so much. That's really humbling to hear. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to do this a lot. I cannot thank you enough.
Daniel DiManna, thank you so much for coming, and this was wonderful.
Thank you guys very much. Yeah, it was great.
We'd like to send a shout out to our patron, Sean Stiff, for pledging at the Kaiju Visionary level. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
If you'd like to get a hold of us and send us some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is feedback@kaijuvision.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook.
Our podcast is available on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, our YouTube channel, and on our website, kaijuvision.com. Thanks to Audiophiliac for creating our theme and bumper music. www.fiverr.com/audiophiliac. If you like our podcast, please support us on Patreon. I'm Brian Scherschel, and I edited this podcast.
And I'm Nathan Marchand, and I'm the podcast webmaster. Sayonara!